Hello, brothers. Just wanted to first let you know how much I really enjoyed our first module together and being able to meet you and fellowship with you. I was very encouraged by your response and your enthusiasm and being in the class. And so I'm looking forward to future modules with you together. And as I mentioned in class, in between our modules, when we are meeting in person for that week at a time, we will have some classes by Zoom in order to review assignments, to go over some important aspects of the course material, to address any questions you have. And for the most part, those will be done live together, but sometimes I will be unable to meet with you due to other commitments, other training that I'm doing. And so I will record a few sessions as well. And since we are approaching the holiday season we are unable to meet by Zoom in person right now, I am going to record the first couple of sessions with you. And this session, our focus is going to be on a couple of things. One, the class schedule. I want to go over that real quick, and the assignments overview. And then today, in this first session together, I would like to cover the background context assignment that you were given. All right. So let's get right to it. I'm hoping to have this not be a long video, just long enough to give you some helpful information, but not too long, since I know you're very busy. But the plan for today's class, this recording, this session, is first to discuss the class and the assignment schedule, then to do an overview of the Module 1 assignments that you've been assigned, and then to review the background context of Colossians assignment 1.11. All right. Now, as far as our class and assignment schedule, here we are. We met together a few weeks ago in person to go over the syllabus for Module 1. And then from basically now until late April, we'll have classes by Zoom. Most will be live, but some will be recorded. And then at the end of April, your assignments are due for Module 1. So make sure you're following the schedule that I gave you. Many of you are. Most of you have already done the first couple of assignments, which is great. Really appreciate that. Keep going. And hopefully these Zoom classes will help you if you get stuck. They'll provide you some review of the assignment and what to do there as well. But make sure by the end of April, all your assignments are due, because in the first week, a couple of weeks in May, we're going to be holding our next module. Now, if you also remember, we talked about the fact there were too many students to all meet together during the same week when we'll be doing you will be doing your sermons for Colossians. And so we will have preaching labs. And in order for that to maximize that experience and training, we want to have smaller labs together. And so we won't have enough instructors to do all the preaching labs if we did it all the same week. So we've split the group into 2 weeks. And if you will remember, I had you sign up for the to do one of the 2 batches. So let me just review that quickly with you right here. The first half of the group is here. You will be meeting together. We will be meeting together on May 6th to 11th. That's the first full week of May. And here are your names for that you signed up for. So just keep that in mind. Don't forget, I'll be reviewing this again as well. The second batch, that will be meeting on the week of May 13th to 18th. These are the brothers that you volunteered to preach for, to participate in the class for that week. So unfortunately, we won't all be able to be together for this, but at least we'll be split in half, and we'll be having preaching labs together during that time. And both classes will be covering the same material in the lectures. All right, so we'll be covering the same syllabus together in class and then doing the preaching labs. We just had to split it into 2 groups. Okay, so that said, the schedule then is to be prepared next May in order to do that. And then December, just to give you an idea, roughly probably early December, first couple weeks in December, we'll have our module 3, where we'll focus on poetry. Module 2 will be focusing on narratives. Module 1, the focus is epistles. So we'll be looking at each of those genres together. Okay, so that's just a general overview of the class schedule. As far as the Zoom classes, let me also just show you briefly that as well. If I can pull up the other, I think it's here. Yes. Okay. This is the proposed schedule for our Zoom classes moving forward. And you can see here, I've got them listed out, each of the weeks that I'll be available. Some will be recorded sessions. Most will be in person. Again, we'll be going over all the assignments together between now and April. So I plan to hopefully record for you as well for next week on the contextual flow of the book, all right, to help prepare you for that assignment. And then we'll meet together after Christmas. The end of December, we'll be able to start having our live Zoom sessions. We'll meet together several weeks in a row before I have a trip planned that will interrupt our Zoom schedule. All right, but this just gives you an idea. You can take a look here and note the dates to be ready. Again, this will be on Friday mornings from 10 a.m. to noon. Fridays 10 to noon. Okay. All right. Keep moving. All right. The Module 1 assignments, just to remind you, by the way, these are in your syllabus, again, on the first couple of pages. But just to remind you, you've got the reading assignments, and most of you have already finished the first assignment that I've given in reading. That's great. And some of you have also written a response to that when you turn in the assignment. You don't have to do that. You don't have to do a review or a response. If you would like to, feel free. I've read a couple of them and very good. So if you would like to do that, that's perfectly fine. But you will only be graded just on completing the reading assignment. All right. Now, the exegetical assignments, those are all the written assignments. Already, we've had the first one due, reading and observing Colossians, and most of you have completed that assignment. A few of you haven't, so make sure to get on that so you don't get behind. Now, the next assignment to work on is the background context, which we'll be talking about in this particular video. All right. And then there are the exposition assignments, which will be due a little bit later after you've done the exegesis assignments. And notice again, you are going to be assigned 2 passages. All right. Here's the table that has those. It's also in your syllabus. For most of you, you're on the table in the syllabus. Some of you signed up later, so but your name should be in here on this table. But notice for every one of you, you have 2 passages assigned to complete. So for example, Brother Sunny has Colossians 1, 15 to 17, and then Colossians 1, 18 to 20. So notice the verses are together, so you can study the paragraph as a whole, but when you preach, you're going to preach 2 messages, 2 separate messages, 2 30-minute messages, and they will cover the verses as I've indicated. So for Brother Sunny, he'll have Colossians 1, 15 to 17 for his first sermon, and Colossians 1, 18 to 20 for the second sermon. Okay, so that's why I've listed 2 passages there, because you have 2 assigned passages. And so over here, notice you're going to have the exegetical assignments will be for both. The first 3 assignments are for the book as a whole. Okay, from assignments 1.10, 11, and 12, that's the book as a whole, as well as 113. 114, you'll be diagramming just a couple of paragraphs in Colossians. And then assignment 15 through 17, you're going to be working on your assigned passages, both of them together in those assignments. And then assignment 118 and 119 will split. You'll do your exegetical idea for each assigned passage. And then the same for the exposition. You'll do the homiletical idea for each assigned passage, and then the sermon manuscript for each assigned passage. Okay? And then you will preach in the next module each assigned passage in person. All right, so hopefully that makes sense. As we go to those assignments, I'll explain that again in detail. All right. Again, to be reminded, here's the full exegetical exposition process. So the exegetical assignments will cover these first 8 steps, and then the exposition assignments will cover these last 5 steps. All right. And again, the focus, the important part is the exegetical steps lead us to the exegetical idea of the passage, which again is the author's main point. And then the exposition steps lead us to the homiletical idea of the passage, which is your main point and outline. All right. So all the assignments we have to do with each of these steps, which we covered in the course. And then this is just a diagram, a figure representing all of the steps in the process. Okay. So let's get now to the assignment 1.11. Now, we notice I'm skipping the first step because that assignment's already been due. Again, most of you completed that, so I'm not going to go over that with you in this video, but I'm just going to cover the background context of the book. So I'm going to review a key concepts with you, go over the assignment with you, and hopefully that will address any questions you have. If you do have any questions, feel free to message me or email me and ask me your specific questions. I'll be glad to help. Okay? So remember, the background context really is the setting of the book, the overall background of the book. The details are about the author, the recipients, the reason that the author wrote, what prompted him to write, the historical context, the places mentioned, the people mentioned, the culture of the author and recipient. So those are important details to understand the background of the author. Again, remember that we want to understand the context, and that context includes the 2 parts, right? The background context, which is the setting of the book, and then the literary context, which is what was actually written and the author's flow of thought through the book. We also refer to that as the contextual flow. All right, and that's the next assignment after this one. But for this particular assignment, the background context, we are looking for information regarding these particular parts of the book. All right, so I have this table for you. And by the way, in your notes in your syllabus, page 32 is where we are at. Just mention that to you. And in your notes on page, let me find it here if I can. On page 44, I believe, you have this table that I show here. And the table gives you guiding questions to identify the details of the background context. Now, you may notice that a lot of the things that we're going to look at in the background context, you already made mention of in the first assignment, assignment 1.10, the reading and observing Colossians. But in that assignment, you just identify some basic things. Like, for example, the author, you just need to note who the author is and his tone. Same with the recipients. For the social context, I just asked you to identify other people mentioned in the book. But for this assignment, for the background context, you're now going to not just mention who is in the book, for example, for social context, you're going to know what do we know about that person. So this is going to be a more involved and detailed study of each of these particular categories. So for the author, you don't just mention who the author is, but now also what are the circumstances that he describes about himself? What does he indicate about himself in the book? What do we know about this author from other passages of Scripture? And so there's going to be more detail that you need to provide, all right, than you did in the previous assignment. All right, and so this table simply gives some guiding questions, things to consider as you go through each of these particular categories of the background context. You don't have to answer every question, but the intent is to give you an idea of the things to look for, the things to ask yourself in studying each of these contexts. All right. Now, in the class, we went through an example with Philemon. I'm not going to read it here for you. You can read through it again in your class notes if you go to page, I think it's 32, is it? Let me just confirm that. page 30 is the background context that you'll be where we discuss this. All right. And then page 32 is where we actually start going through each of the steps. All right. So you can read through Philemon again. I'm just going to cover the details of what we're looking for. So after reading several times, again, remember, read through the book several times, and then you're going to note who the author is, the circumstances, etc. What does he write about himself? So for Philemon, it would be details like this. Paul is the main author, and note also indicate the verses what you find this information in. All right, so Paul is the main author. Timothy is also listed as an author. In fact, let me do this. I'm going to just copy this over so we can have this as well. All right, so I apologize for this brief delay as I put a few things together here. I think it'll help make the discussion flow a little easier. Okay, so let me put this over and then try this again. All right. Okay, so we got the passage to our right here. Now, so as we're looking at the background context for the author, again, you're going to just note this is for Philemon. So we notice in verse 1, Paul lists himself. He also lists Timothy as a secondary author. Perhaps Timothy actually transcribed the letter for Paul. And then we want to indicate what does the author say about himself in the letter. In this case, there's a tone of his greetings are positive. Paul begins his letter by expressing his gratitude for Philemon, and particularly his gratitude for his testimony. Paul states, verse 8, that he has authority in Philemon's life, but chooses to appeal to him. Verse 9, Paul mentions that he's in prison. Also in verse 10, he says, in my imprisonment. Verse 1, he says he's in prison. Verse 9, Paul describes himself as an elder. We see that here, the aged, he mentions himself. So then there's some other details. Again, I note the verses that Paul mentions he converted Onesimus. Paul likely led Philemon to the Lord based on his comment in verse 19 that Philemon owed him even his own self. So really this step, you're just identifying things the author says about himself in the letter. All right. How does he describe himself? Does he indicate his circumstances? What's his situation? What details does he give? All right. And then it's the same for the audience or the recipients. Not only do I need to identify who they are, but also, again, circumstances they're in. What does the author say about them? What's the author's relationship with them? And so for Philemon, notice in this letter, it's addressed specifically to Philemon. All right, he's the primary recipient, but notice also Apphia, Archippus, and the church in Philemon's house are also mentioned as recipients. Philemon's faith and testimony are described in verse 6. His encouragement to the saints in verse 7. We note that Philemon had a slave, at least one, Onesimus, and Philemon likely was converted by Paul. So again, you're looking for information about the recipients as you go through the letter. Don't just indicate who the recipient is, but also what details do we know about him or them, depending on who the recipient is. Now, once we do that, now we want to understand, okay, what's the historical background of the book? That is, what events do we know when the book was written, roughly? What time period was it taking place in? And given that Paul wrote Philemon while he's in prison, this letter was delivered by Tychicus, which we note from Ephesians 6 and Colossians 4. This is one of the prison epistles. that Paul delivered. And the first Roman imprisonment was recorded in Acts 27 and 28. I went through these details in the class with you as to why this epistle was likely written in the Roman imprisonment. Remember, Paul was taken into custody in Jerusalem, and we went through the dates there of when that took place, probably around 57, 58 AD. And then he was taken from there. He spent 2 years in Caesarea in prison, and then from there went to Rome and was in prison for 2 years, as we learn at the end of the book of Acts. It just says that Paul was there in prison for 2 years. And in both Philippians and Philemon, there are several verses where Paul indicates this expectation that he would soon be released. And so we can then assume that those prison epistles, again, Ephesians, Colossians, Philemon, and Philippians, were probably written towards the end of his imprisonment, which would put it in Rome around 61 or 62 AD, something like that. All right. So you just want to take note of that. But it's not just the dates we're interested in. We're also interested in the historical events. And so you can go to the book of Acts, particularly the last 6 or 7 chapters, especially the last 2 chapters, which describe Paul entering into Rome and being imprisoned there. And so that gives an idea of his circumstance when he wrote this particular letter. Now, the social context. This is very important in the letter to Philemon. Again, it's not just what names are mentioned, but what is known about them from either this letter, this book that you're studying, or we may have information about them from other books. And so here we have several people mentioned. Timothy is one. All right. And so I just note various things about him. And notice I list the passages. His mother was Jewish believer. His father was Greek. Where Paul met him. How he ministered with Paul. He was sent by Paul to minister, to several references to that. So this is a rather thorough discussion of what we know about Timothy. All right. He's mentioned in the letter. Now, of course, Onesimus, he's a key person mentioned within this letter. He's mentioned not only here in Philemon, but also in Colossians 4, where he's described as a faithful brother and that he is one of the Colossians. All right. So it's just an example. Again, notice I put the verse references. I also note there's another letter he's mentioned in. So I put that as well and what it says about him. Again, this is more than just telling us, you don't just put Onesimus as mentioned in Philemon. You need to also indicate what do we know about him. All right, Epaphras is mentioned in verse 23 here, right? Epaphras, my fellow prisoner in Christ Jesus, greets you. Okay, so what do we know about Epaphras? Not only from the letter, he's noted as a fellow prisoner in Christ, but also from Colossians 1 and chapter 4, there's more information about Epaphras. He was the one who brought the gospel to the Colossians. He was a Colossian himself, and he had a deep concern for them as well as the Laodiceans. All right, and you just keep going through. Okay, Mark is mentioned here in Philemon. What do we know about Mark? He's called a fellow worker, all right, in verse 24. But then notice Colossians and Acts and 2 Timothy, Mark's also mentioned. What do we learn about him there? He is Barnabas's cousin. Paul asked the Colossians to welcome Mark. So apparently he visited their Colossae. And then he was with them on some missionary efforts. And then, of course, that he left them on the first missionary journey. So Paul and Barnabas got in an argument. As they began the second journey, Barnabas wanted to take him. Paul did not. So, of course, that's all recorded. This is important. Just put this information down. What do we know about him? Demas, also mentioned here in Philemon. What do we know about him? Demas was a fellow worker. He sent his greetings to the Colossians in Colossians 4. And then notice 2 Timothy 4. Later on, during Paul's second Roman imprisonment, it indicates that Demas left Paul, having loved this present world, it said there. So it seems that Demas fell away, unfortunately. Aristarchus mentioning Philemon. Luke's mentioned. Tychicus is mentioned. All right. And here's an important thing to consider. Everyone mentioned in Philemon is also mentioned in the letter to the Colossians, except for Philemon and Apphia. Everyone in Colossians is mentioned in Philemon, except for Tychicus, Nymphas, and Justus. What does this tell us? Well, and especially considering Onesimus is from Colossae, Epaphras is from Colossae, Onesimus is a slave of Philemon's. So what does that tell us? Philemon's house is in Colossae. And all of these common names reinforce that. So the house, the church that meets in Philemon's house, that is mentioned in verse 2, to the church in your house, Paul says, what church is that? That is the church of Colossae. How do we learn that? By studying the different people mentioned in Philemon and finding those connections. So this is what helps give us more background. This helps a lot now, because now we know some things about the circumstance and the situation in the Colossian church from reading Colossians. And when you study Colossians for your assignment, now you know, this situation between Philemon and Onesimus was also happening in the Colossian church. So now you have more background, you have more information to help understand the background as you study the letter to the Colossians. Okay, so this is what helps tremendously if we pay attention to details. Even though it takes more time, more effort, it helps us see the links between these letters, these books in the New Testament. We have links with Acts and the letter to Colossians and Philemon. We have links between Philemon and Colossians. There's links between Ephesians and Colossians. And so all of these help us put together, piece together the background of the letter. So as you're going through the background of Colossians, it's helpful to know the connections to Philemon. And by the way, the background context then of Colossians will be very similar to Philemon. So if you pay attention to what we're doing here with Philemon, a lot of this is going to apply to your study in Colossians. All right. The next thing, the geographical context. What places are mentioned in the letter? All right. And again, it's not just identifying that place as you did for your observation assignment, but also what do we know about that place? What do we know about the people in that particular place? And then you can use a resource to look up maps. So now in Philemon, there's no explicit mention of any location. The church in Philemon's house, yes, that's a location, but the issue is, where is that church? It's in Colossae, as we just discussed. And so knowing that, then we can go to what do we know about Colossae? All right. And here I just accessed this particular resource, the internationalstandardbible.com, looked up Colossae, and it gave some details about the location, about its background, its history, its importance in the Roman Empire, and a few other details, that it was mixed between mainly Gentiles, but there were also Jews that lived there. And we see that in the book of Colossians with the references to the Judaism and the Judaizers that were trying to persuade the Colossians. All right, so these are just some details, and then a map that I got from a particular resource that shows, I don't know if you can see it here, it's not super clear, but we have Colossae, Hierapolis, Laodicea here. Ephesus is right here. And then this is the Lycus Valley all along here, right? It's about, let's say 100 kilometers or so, give or take. And so we have this map here that gives that information and those details, okay? And I got this from, I believe, Bible Hub. I don't know why I didn't put the reference there. Okay. Cultural context. What do we know about the culture? What do we know about the people? And so for Philemon, obviously the slavery was an institution in the Roman Empire. It's mentioned. I have several passages here where it's mentioned. Paul doesn't condemn slavery, but does teach us that we are all equal in Christ. And even here in Philemon, encourages Philemon to receive Onesimus back, no longer as a slave, but as a brother. So that could be a implication or an implied statement by Paul to free Onesimus from slavery, which But Paul, interestingly, doesn't make an issue about slavery. He simply describes in the Colossian letter the appropriate behavior of slaves and masters toward one another. All right. So you'd want to know about slavery. What else do we know about the culture? Well, Colossians tells us about the culture and some of the religious influences. So you would want to note those as well. All right. Theological context. Again, this is where Colossians 2, we learn about the false teaching taking place. So you want to identify what are the theological issues. What do the Colossians, what do they face? What's their religious background before coming to Christ? Those kinds of things you would want to put here. All right. Now the occasion. Now this is the reason that we're looking at the background context. Again, remember, in epistles, every letter, every book is this case, but especially in epistles, there are occasional letters. It means there's some circumstance, some situation that prompts the author to write to those people. So in this case, what prompted Paul to write to Philemon? What situation, what circumstance prompted him to write? So that's what we want to identify. And by doing all the background study that we've done so far, that will help us in knowing what the background context is, and particularly the occasion of writing this letter to Philemon, right? And as we go through the letter, we realize, right, Philemon is a slave, as it says in verse 16. He must have run away from Philemon. Onesimus is a slave. He must have run away from Philemon because Onesimus met Paul in Rome. And in this letter, Paul says, I'm sending him back so that you would receive him, forgive him. All right. Onesimus had gotten saved through Paul's ministry in Rome. Paul wanted to be obedient to the Roman law, and so he sent Onesimus back. So this is the occasion now. Onesimus has been sent back to Philemon with this letter. Tychicus is with him as well, and he wanted to present this letter to Philemon to receive Onesimus back, essentially to forgive him. Okay, so that's an overview just of what we've done to give you an idea, an example from Philemon for what you want to do. Now, here's the actual assignment that you're going to do for Colossians. Okay, this is assignment 1.11. It's the background context of Colossians. So I have the instructions here on what to do. And then I have an example, again, what we just covered in Philemon. So you have the exact kinds of details that I want you to do you're going to do for Colossians. And again, there's overlap between Philemon and Colossians. So some of the information from Philemon will be very helpful for you in your Colossians assignment. All right, so you'll put the author, the recipient, social context, right, the historical, all the things we just covered. Okay, this that I'm showing you here is from the Philemon example, all leading to the occasion. And I put the table here as well, just for you to have as a reference. And then after that, after the example, I put space in here for you to complete the same information for Colossians. Again, the whole book of Colossians. All right, so identify the background context following the format that I gave you. So there's space for the author, the recipients. And again, remember, as you record this information, note the verses that you identify that information from, okay? Don't just put the statement down. Also include the verses, all right? That will be helpful for you later, as you can go quickly and know where you found that particular piece of information. So again, social context, historical context, geographical, cultural, all of that you will do for Colossians, okay? So hopefully that makes sense. Now, again, just to remind you, most of you are already aware of this, but I just want to show you a couple things. Where to access this? How do I access this? Well, again, we're going to go to Canvas. All right, so I'm going to pull this up. You're going to type tmai.instructure.com. All right, and it's going to take you to the login page. All right, and so you're going to type that in. Gets to login, so you have your email address and then the password that you chose. Okay, to register to Canvas. You'll put that in, and again, most of you have already done this, but there's a few of you that haven't yet turned in an assignment, so this may be something you need to understand. You'll see Expository Preaching 1 here, right? This is our class. That should be the only one that shows up on your just called the dashboard. As we add more modules, you'll see more when we get to those classes. So just press that one, and this is what you're going to see as you press it. All right. Have these. This is your menu on the left here. Okay. And the page here that we see is this is the all the information about the course. And I already mentioned there's a key link here. We'll look at that in a minute. But first, you want to go over and press assignments. All right, and look for assignment 1.11. By the way, you'll see here past assignments. This is at the bottom of the page. These are assignments that are already due. Okay, so hopefully you've got these two done. If not, get on those quickly. All right, and then you're going to next go to, these are the next assignments that are due. A couple of reading assignments, and then here's the, notice here is assignment 1.11. All right, so you're gonna hit that assignment. Click on that. All right, notice before you hit start assignment, okay, you actually need to download the assignment, all right, which is right here. All right, so download the assignment first, okay, and you can do that. You press this one and it'll download for you. All right, it just downloaded it for me here. All right, so press this link here that I circle and you'll get the assignment downloaded for you. All right, so if you press the link directly, you'll see this. You can download it up here where my cursor is. Okay, up here if you want to do it that way. But it's the same thing I just showed you. Okay, and then once you've downloaded it, once you've completed the work on it, as I showed you here, you filled all this information in for the assignment. Once you've done that, then you will hit start assignment because now you're ready to upload. All right, you notice that here? File upload. Okay, and then you press this, choose file. Okay, that's where you're going to go to that file, hit that, and then it's going to ask you to identify the document you want to upload. So let's say I'm going to, upload this, pretend this was my assignment. So I'll open it. And notice now here, do you see it? It's been identified, and then I just hit right here, submit assignment, and then it will receive that file that I've uploaded. But again, first, download the assignment here, do the assignment, write it up. Then once you're ready, once you've completed that, then you're ready to go to submit or start assignment. And then you'll get this box here for file upload and upload your assignment. All right. And once you've done that, then I will receive that assignment from you and I will grade it as soon as I'm able to. I will grade it and then send it back to you. Now, one thing I mentioned to you as well is this link here. I mentioned in class, this is a key link. Go here. And then you can, I've got all the material from the in-class instruction you can download. I'm working on the video links. I'm hoping to get those as soon as possible to you. And then this session now, I'm going to have the notes for this session as well as a video for this session for you to access. And then I'm going to put the assignment as well here for you to access, okay? So again, that's on that link to download all course files. All right, right here in the green. Okay, so that's a key one to keep in mind. All right. Well, hopefully that answered any questions you may have. And if it didn't, feel free to message me or email me to let me know what your question is. And looking forward to receiving your assignments and give you that feedback. All right. Take care. God bless you. Have a blessed week. Bye-bye.